Chapter 7: The Virtual Reality World Projection Hypothesis and its Context. 7.1: Integrating Transcendent Physics with Ancient Myth. A speculative yet increasingly discussed hypothesis in recent decades is the virtual reality world projection theory, often associated with a school of thought known as the domain physics school or storage school. According to this perspective, a higher dimensional creator maintains an immense information storage system, from which necessary cultural and technological data is projected into our world. Proponents argue that the sudden emergence of Sumerian civilization with its sophisticated urban administration, legal codes, and mythological traditions may be interpreted as a deliberate projection by a higher dimensional program designed to accelerate human development. Once this projected phase had fulfilled its function, the higher-level data was retrieved, explaining the disappearance of the Sumerian people from the historical record. 7.2: Compatibility with biblical traditions. The flood reset meta-interpretation. If one assumes that an actual catastrophic flood occurred in ancient Mesopotamia, it might be interpreted within the virtual reality framework as a reset event, programmed by higher forces. In the Sumerian flood myth, Enki's intervention delivering a warning to Ziusudra or Atrahasis from behind a barrier of reeds can be viewed as analogous to the biblical command given to Noah to build an ark. This parallel suggests that the Sumerian flood narrative, and by extension, the Noah story, might represent deliberate interventions by a higher dimensional creator seeking to regulate or reboot human civilization. The notion of a flood reset fits neatly with the idea that our historical reality could be a sophisticated simulation subject to periodic recalibrations. 7.3: The challenge of distinguishing fact from speculation. While the virtual reality hypothesis provides an intriguing framework for interpreting ancient mysteries, it remains highly speculative from a conventional historical perspective. The suggestion that Sumerian civilization was a projected phenomenon, and that its myths, including those concerning the flood, contain embedded clues to an underlying simulated reality, is fascinating but unproven. Nonetheless, the compelling parallels between Sumerian narratives and later biblical traditions have encouraged scholars and enthusiasts of comparative mythology to further explore these connections. In particular, the identification of Ziusudra or Atrahasis as a prototype for Noah is widely supported within the field of comparative mythology, bolstering the view that ancient flood myths share a common origin. Chapter 8: The Quest for Immortality. The reality of the flood myth, and its impact. 8.1: The immortality plant as an archetype of the tree of life. One of the most memorable motifs in the Epic of Gilgamesh is the quest for the plant of immortality. In the narrative, Gilgamesh manages to obtain this plant, only for it to be stolen by a serpent, underscoring the tragic realization that immortality is ultimately unattainable for mortal beings. This motif is paralleled in various other cultural myths that feature a tree of life, or a sacred plant symbolizing eternal youth. If the Sumerians indeed referred to their land as potassium iodide Ngi, interpreted by some as the land of the master of reeds, then the symbolic link between reeds, water, and regenerative properties becomes even more significant. 8.2: The likelihood of an actual great flood. The possibility that a massive flood occurred in the Mesopotamian region is seriously considered by many scholars. Archaeological excavations have uncovered sedimentary layers that some researchers interpret as evidence of a great flood around 3000 BCE. Although definitive proof is still lacking, the consistency of flood myths throughout Mesopotamia, combined with the similarities between these myths and the biblical account of Noah's flood, suggests that a major flood event may well have taken place. Specific narrative details such as the construction of a massive ark and the release of birds to search for dry land are echoed in both traditions, reinforcing the argument that the Sumerian flood myth is based on a historical event that was later mythologized. 8.3: Assessing the high likelihood of historical reality. The presence of certain names and events in the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as corroborative archaeological evidence, supports the hypothesis that while these flood narratives have been mythologized over time, they may be rooted in actual historical events. if figures such as Ziusudra or Atrahasis were real individuals whose experiences during a catastrophic flood were later embellished into myth, then the Sumerian flood myth can be viewed as the historical prototype for the biblical Noah story. Thus, to refer to Ziusudra as the archetypal Noah is a plausible conclusion based on comparative mythological evidence. Chapter 9 Sumerian Civilization in the Old Testament. Archetypes and their legacy. 9.1 The inheritance of the flood myth in the Bible. The flood myth, which was widely circulated in ancient Mesopotamia, appears to have been transmitted to the ancestors of the Hebrews, ultimately influencing the account of Noah's flood in the book of Genesis chapters 69. Not only do the overall narrative structures align, but specific elements such as the divine covenant, established after the flood, and the motif of selective preservation are remarkably similar. Detailed instructions for building an ark further reinforce the link between these traditions. Thus, many scholars contend that the Sumerian and Akkadian flood myths laid the groundwork for the biblical Noah narrative. 9.2 Enki's role and the Sumerians' self-designation. Among the pantheon of Sumerian deities, Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation, played a central role. Some researchers have speculated that the Sumerians' self-designation Ki-Ngi may be connected with Enki's name, given the shared Enki element. While the exact translation of Ki-Ngi remains debated, with interpretations ranging from the land of civilization to the land of noble Mont. Fact that the Sumerian homeland was a marshy, reed-filled environment lends support to the land of reeds interpretation. Archaeological evidence confirms the extensive use of reeds in construction and daily life, which suggests that the Sumerians held reeds in high regard. This reverence for reeds may also be symbolically linked to the veneration of Enki, who is often depicted as a benefactor during the flood myth, delivering warnings through reed barriers. 9.3 The abrupt emergence and disappearance of Sumerian civilization. Historical records indicate that Sumerian civilization emerged suddenly, with remarkable cultural sophistication, and was later absorbed into the broader Mesopotamian cultural milieu, notably by the Akkadians and Babylonians. The sudden rise and subsequent disappearance of the Sumerians remain one of the enduring mysteries of ancient history. It is as if they burst onto the scene with an explosion of civilization, and, once their role had been fulfilled, were systematically assimilated into subsequent cultures. The fact that the mythological narratives such as the flood legend were transmitted and eventually influenced the Old Testament underscores the profound impact Sumerian civilization has had on the collective religious and cultural memory of humanity.